7 News always welcomes local leaders, from legislators to law enforcement, to discuss what's being done to improve your community. And we are so happy to welcome back the chief of the Fairfax County Police Department, Chief Kevin Davis. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Michelle. Thanks for having me. Sorry, I'm not there in person.
I know, we'll get you next time, right?
Absolutely.
So, Chief, let's begin with the big story. I know your agency deployed its dive team as well as search helicopters as well the night of the mid-air collision near DCA. How is your department still supporting the recovery and providing resources?
Well, Michelle, one of the things I've always said about law enforcement in the National Capital Region, federal, state, and local, is that nobody does collaboration better. So we've had our helicopter, we've had our Marine unit, we've had our dive team. We've had so many Fairfax County police officers who have been assisting in this national tragedy, and that goes on to this day.
And I know most of us in the newsroom, we noted that it had been decades since we've seen such a large emergency response to a tragedy like the one that we were seeing unfold. Walk us through the coordination that's really required for so many agencies to send the necessary equipment and personnel when something like this happens. What does it take to mobilize so quickly?
Well, believe it or not, it's pretty seamless. That space, unlike any other space I can think of, number one, it's the most protected airspace in the world. And as I'm looking at the water right now, the water there is the jurisdiction of Washington, D.C. On one shore is Maryland, on the other shore is Virginia. So the communications that take place on a daily basis are instantaneous. So there was not any delay or gap in the notifications. And then each individual agency, whether it's Fairfax County, Arlington, Alex City, Virginia State Police, Prince George's, Montgomery County, MPD, and I even think the Maryland Natural Resources Police were involved. It's an instantaneous just go to the scene. We certainly don't want to over deploy, but law enforcement in this area is pretty good at immediately deploying, and then an incident command structure is set up on the scene, and they place the right people in the right places. But the immediate response was focused on saving lives, and unfortunately that turned into a recovery effort that we're still in the midst of. But the first order of business for all of public safety is to get there and do everything we can to save lives.
Chief, how has this tragedy personally affected you?
Well, it's a lot. You mentioned the last time this happened in the early 1980s. I was in grade school or high school, and I remember when the plane crashed into the 14th Street Bridge. So as safe as air travel is, it's an unforgiving catastrophe when something goes wrong. And I know the NTSB is an investigative body. We'll get to the bottom of it. I think we'll hear some preliminary findings within 30 days, and then a longer report later. But in the meantime, so many of the victims, they're all victims, and our heart goes out to all of them, and we pray for them all. But so many were associated with schools right here in Fairfax County, students and figure skaters and parents and so many others. I've been doing the best I can to read about each and every one of the souls that were lost, and it's devastating.
Yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying there. As you learn more about the victims, it becomes even more heartbreaking. Chief, we want to touch on a couple other news items locally happening. We recently had the sentencing of a MS-13 member to life in prison for murders in Virginia and Massachusetts. Do you want to add any final notes to that case?
Yeah, sure, Michelle. Actually, it wasn't just one lifetime sentence. He was sentenced to 6 lifetimes, and he was a Salvadorian national who was involved in 6 murders, mostly in Fairfax County. One up in his very first one up in New Bedford, Connecticut. But the coordination, back to that word, coordination and collaboration between the U.S. Attorney's Office, now led by U.S. Attorney Eric Siebert, but when this case was being developed by Jessica Aber. But our gang unit, we have a world-class gang unit here, and they've worked seamlessly with local prosecutors here in Fairfax County, federal prosecutors, and to put together a case like this that, as you can imagine, it's a RICO case. It's a complicated, complex investigation. but holding those folks accountable is ultimately where we have arrived. So it's sad that someone's did something to other humans that would garner 6 lifetime sentences, but I'm glad we were able to hold that person accountable for the sake of our the surviving family and friends of our victims.
Okay, now to the fun stuff. There's a big time competition this weekend, and we're not talking about the Super Bowl this time. It's the Adoption Bowl for Pups. Tell us all about it.
I'm not sure it's much of a competition, Michelle. I'm probably going to win handily. Um, it's me versus the fire chief, John Butler, great guy. It's the second annual Adoption Bowl, and our animal shelter in Fairfax County. You talk about world class. They're the best I've ever seen, and one of the challenges in adopting pets surrounds the larger dogs. So Chief Butler and I have selected our teams of large dogs, and it's a contest to see how many of those dogs will be adopted out between now and the Super Bowl. And last year, 40 dogs were adopted in our inaugural Super Bowl contest. So we're hoping for even more. I just wish there was some burgundy and gold in this year's.
Oh, I know.
Yeah, almost next year, done deal.
We own next year. We're going to save this tape, right? Well, as far as the dogs go, whoever wins the competition, the dogs really are the winner because they find forever homes. And we should mention that the adoption fees will be waived for those dogs, as you mentioned, that are on the larger side, over 45 pounds. Chief Davis, thank you so much.
Thank you, Michelle. Have a great week.
All right, you take care.